In a quiet town surrounded by mountains and long winding roads lived a young man named Daniel. Daniel was known as a polite and careful person. He always spoke softly, always tried to help others, and always tried his best to avoid making anyone unhappy. At first glance, Daniel looked like a good and successful person. He had a decent job, many acquaintances, and a reputation for being responsible. But inside, Daniel carried a heavy burden. Every day he worried about what people thought of him. When he spoke in meetings at work, he wondered, did I sound stupid? When he posted something online, he checked repeatedly to see how many people liked it. If someone didn't respond to his message, his mind immediately created stories. Maybe they are angry with me. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe they don't respect me. Daniel's happiness depended almost completely on the reactions of other people. If someone praised him, he felt confident. If someone criticized him, even slightly, he felt deeply hurt. He tried very hard to make everyone like him. But strangely, the harder he tried, the more exhausted he became. The weight of other people's opinions. One afternoon at work, Daniel stayed late to finish a project. He wanted to impress his manager and prove that he was capable. The next morning, he presented his work. His manager glanced at it briefly and said, "It's okay, but I think it needs improvement." The comment was simple and ordinary. But for Daniel, it felt like a failure. All day he replayed the moment in his mind. He thinks I'm incompetent. Everyone must think I'm bad at my job. Maybe I don't belong here. That evening he sat alone in a cafe staring at his coffee. His thoughts were heavy and endless. At the table beside him sat an older man reading a book. After a few minutes, the man looked up and noticed Daniel's troubled expression. "You look like you're carrying a heavy world in your head," the old man said gently. Daniel smiled politely. "Just work stress," he replied. The man closed his book. "Most stress is not about work," he said calmly. "It's about what we believe others think of us." Daniel looked up surprised. "How did you know?" The old man smiled. "Because I once lived the same way. A different way to think." The man introduced himself as Mr. Sato, a retired teacher who enjoyed reading philosophy. They began talking. Daniel explained how he always tried to meet people's expectations but still felt anxious and unhappy. Mr. Sato listened carefully. Then he said something Daniel had never heard before. "Your problem is not lack of confidence." Daniel frowned. "Then what is it?" "You lack the courage to be disliked." Daniel blinked. "That sounds strange," he said. Mr. Sato chuckled softly. "Let me explain." He leaned forward slightly. "Every person wants to be liked, that is natural, but when your entire happiness depends on approval, you become a prisoner of other people's opinions." Daniel thought about this quietly. Mr. Sato continued. "You wake up each day asking the same question, what must I do so that people will approve of me?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, that's exactly how it feels. And that," Mr. Sato said, "is the reason you feel unhappy. A different kind of happiness." Mr. Sato explained further. "When you believe you are useful to someone, you naturally feel value and purpose. And when you feel that way," he continued, "you no longer depend on constant approval." Daniel began applying this idea slowly. At work, he stopped obsessing over whether people liked his presentations. Instead, he focused on how his work could help the team succeed. At home, he began listening more carefully to friends and family. He discovered something surprising. Helping others without expecting praise felt peaceful. Letting go of comparison. One day, a coworker named Sarah received a promotion. In the past, Daniel would have felt jealous. But this time, something felt different. He congratulated her sincerely. And he meant it. Later, he realized something important. Sarah's success did not diminish his value. Life was not a competition. Everyone could grow without taking something away from others. For the first time, Daniel felt free from a constant, invisible race. The present moment. Months passed. Daniel's life had not become perfect. He still faced challenges and criticism. But his perspective had changed. Instead of worrying constantly about the future or the past, he focused more on the present moment. He worked toward his goals, but he also enjoyed the journey. Sometimes he remembered something Mr. Sato once said. Happiness is not something you achieve someday, it is something you practice today. The courage to be disliked. One evening, Daniel returned to the cafe with exciting news. He had accepted a new position that allowed him to lead a small project team. But not everyone supported the decision. Some colleagues disagreed with his ideas. In the past, that would have terrified him. But now he smiled. I finally understand something, he told Mr. Sato. What is that? The old man asked. Daniel answered calmly. Some people will approve of me, some will not. Mr. Sato nodded. And that's okay. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt something powerful. Freedom. The real meaning of courage. Before they left the cafe that night, Mr. Sato said one final thing. Remember this, Daniel. Living freely requires courage. Courage? Daniel asked. Yes, Mr. Sato said. The courage to be disliked. Daniel walked home under the quiet night sky. He realized that happiness was never about winning everyone's approval. It was about living honestly, contributing to others, and accepting that disagreement is a natural part of life. From that day forward, Daniel no longer lived according to other people's expectations. Instead, he lived according to his own values. And in doing so, he discovered something many people spend their entire lives searching for. A quiet, lasting happiness that does not depend on anyone else's approval. The hidden competition. Over the next hour, Mr. Sato explained something that changed Daniel's perspective. When approval becomes your main goal, he said, life becomes a competition. A competition. Yes, if someone else is praised, you feel worse. If someone else succeeds, you feel threatened. Daniel realized he had experienced this many times. When a colleague was promoted, he felt jealous. When a friend achieved something impressive, he felt small. He hated these feelings, but they appeared automatically. Mr. Sato continued. Seeking approval is a game where there are always winners and losers, and when you play that game, relationships become stressful. Daniel looked thoughtful. So what should people do instead? Mr. Sato smiled. Stop trying to win approval. The fear of being disliked. Daniel shook his head. That sounds impossible, he said. What if people dislike me? Mr. Sato looked directly at him. Some people will dislike you no matter what you do. Daniel was silent. That is a simple fact of life, Mr. Sato continued. You could be the kindest person in the world and someone will still misunderstand you. Daniel thought about the many times he tried to please everyone and still failed. But if people dislike me, he said slowly, won't that mean I did something wrong? Not necessarily, Mr. Sato replied. He paused for a moment before continuing. Freedom begins when you accept that you cannot control other people's opinions. The story we tell ourselves. Daniel visited the cafe again the next evening. Mr. Sato was there reading again. Their conversations continued for several weeks. One night, Daniel asked a question that had been bothering him. If happiness is possible, he said, why do so many people remain unhappy? Mr. Sato closed his book thoughtfully. Because unhappiness is sometimes a strategy. Daniel looked confused. A strategy? Yes. Mr. Sato explained an idea inspired by psychologist Alfred Adler. People often create emotions that help them avoid challenges. For example, he said, imagine someone who is afraid of a job interview. They believe their anxiety prevents them from attending. But in reality, Mr. Sato continued, the anxiety is helping them avoid the risk of failure. Daniel sat quietly, absorbing the idea. So sometimes fear protects us from trying. Exactly, Mr. Sato said. The burden of the past. Daniel then asked another question. What about past experiences, he asked. What if someone had a difficult childhood or painful memories? Mr. Sato nodded. Past experiences can influence us, he said, but they do not define us. He spoke slowly and carefully. We do not suffer because of events themselves, we suffer because of the meaning we give those events. Daniel thought about mistakes he had made years ago that still haunted him. You mean, he said, the past does not control our future. That's right, Mr. Sato replied. The person you are today can choose a new direction at any moment. A new goal. Over time, Daniel began to see something clearly. His entire life had been organized around one goal: approval. Every decision, every worry, every anxiety came from that single desire. What should my goal be instead? He asked one evening. Mr. Sato smiled warmly. Contribution. Contribution. Yes, instead of asking how can I make people like me, ask a different question. He paused. How can I be useful to others? Daniel considered this carefully. That sounds like self-sacrifice. Mr. Sato shook his head. No, true contribution is not about sacrificing yourself, it is about discovering the joy of helping others.